Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from Not the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about a somewhat divisive topic where you're going to have some people who, well, are completely fine with some of these cards, and then maybe the vast majority of Commander players are not, or at least the ones that participate in the voting on the Salt Score and EDH Rack. Today we're going to be talking about the most hated artifacts of all time. With all that said, let's jump into it. And there are actually quite a few high up on that list, so starting things off at number 20, we've got Nullrod with a Salt Score of 1.49. This is a very cool card if you don't like things happening. It's an artifact for 2 that says, well, let's just read the old text. Players cannot play any artifact abilities requiring an activation cost. Basically means players can't activate artifact abilities. So, hey, you know those mana rocks that you were planning on using? They're useless. They're just like stones that you just happen to have in play that don't do anything. They're just like, oh, you've got a pet rock. Congratulations. Yeah, this can shut down a lot of things. I mean, obviously, mana rocks. I mean, any creatures that have tap abilities, whatever, and that are artifacts, essentially. You've got, food tokens, clue tokens, treasure tokens, any kind of an artifact with an activated ability. It's like, nope, that doesn't work anymore. Sorry about ya. Yeah, there's a reason why this one made the list, because it's an artifact that hates artifacts. So, there you go. Moving on to number 19, a bit more to the point. Get it? World Slayer. Yeah, also at 1.49, but apparently, according to the EDH Rec calculations, it's slightly saltier. Anyways, World Slayer, if I could say it right, is an equipment for 5 that says, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy all permanents other than World Slayer, and it's going to equip for 5. So this one is, well, on this list because players typically don't like when you just decimate the entire board. Now, this one does require a little bit of work to do so. I mean, you got to get it in play. Oh, so tough. 5 mana. 5 more mana. Oh no. Attach it to a creature and get through on someone with that creature. And then everything is gone, right? Except for World Slayer. Wrong, because in Commander, typically what you're going to be doing is throwing this on a creature that is indestructible, and therefore everything is gone except for World Slayer and that creature. So then essentially, yeah, no other game can happen after that. It's just, oh, let's watch that creature attack again, because all the lands are gone, and that creature's still there. And if I play a land, it's just going to get destroyed again. So yeah, World Slayer, definitely a salt-inducing card. Good enough for number 19. Next up, this one actually made one of my lists a long time ago, one of my first episodes on this channel, Tatiova. Yeah, Storm Cauldron. This is a crazy rude card, 18th, 1.50 on the Salt Score. Artifact for 5 mana. Each player may replenish a land during each of their turns. That is just nice, right? You are just helping players, aren't you? You're just being so kind. Everyone gets extra lands. Yay! But there's a catch. Tiny little catch of the fine print right there. Whenever a land is tapped for mana, return it back to its owner's hand. What? So basically just, hey, you get double the mana, but when you use it, you're going to lose the card. Those lands are going to go back to your hand every single time you utilize them. Now, of course, you again are probably playing a Tatiova type deck where it's like, yeah, landfall shenanigans. Yay, I've got things that can tap to put more lands from my hand into play, more cards that let me play extra lands in a turn. So I'm like, cool, I tap my lands, I get bounce back to my hand, I tap play them again, put them back into play, tap them again for mana. I do a lot of crazy things. Your opponents are not that lucky. They're going to be like, yeah, hey, thanks for the additional land on my turn. Appreciate that. You helped me get more lands out, but I can't cast things because if I tap my cards, all of a sudden they're gone and I can't get them back into play like you do. So yeah, this is definitely a very salt-inducing card if it's out in the right situation, which is most situations for the player using it. Again, congratulations, Storm Cauldron, on being so hated. You made 18th place. Next up, the infamous Manifold. 17th place, 1.54 on the Salt Score. An artifact for 1, it doesn't untap during untap step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 4. If you do, untap it. Beginning of your draw step, if it's tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. Tap for 3. This is basically like a better but worse Soul Ring in a way, because like, okay, yeah, get it down on turn 1, tap for 3. Absurd amounts of mana right away. And of course, yeah, I mean, there are downsides to it, right? In order to untap, you have to pay 4. And if you don't untap, it's going to deal damage to you. Not a lot of damage, but still damage. So, oh, darn, those downsides. Yeah, if you're playing this, you probably maybe have some ways to maybe bounce back to your hand, replay it, or just untap it or whatnot. Or, yeah, just not even care, really, because, again, 1 damage is no big deal, ever. But, yeah, that burst of mana right away can be very result-inducing. Again, just think about, again, your friend who gets the Soul Ring out in turn 1, you're like, ah, not again. But with this one, it's like, oh, you got Mana Vault out. Okay, oh, and there's that. Oh, and there's your commander. Oh, and I'm already gone. So, yeah, Mana Vault can definitely be a very result-inducing card. Good enough for 17th place. Next up, speaking of mana, we've got Storage Matrix. And I guess mana storing, that's where I was going with that. Anyway, 16th place, 1.56 on the Assault scale. Artifact for 3. As long as it's untapped, each player chooses artifact, creature, or land during their untap step. That player can untap only permanents of the chosen type this step. So you're kind of putting your opponents in a bind. I mean, you're putting yourself in a bind too, right? Oh, although this is not necessarily a symmetrical effect because, again, it says as long as it's untapped. And you probably have a way to tap it. So that you're like, oh, well, during my turn, that's not going to be a problem because I'll tap it. But then I'm going to untap it for your turns. Yay! So essentially you're saying, you know what, everyone? You're probably going to have to untap your lands. And you're probably not going to attack with your creatures or tap them. You're probably not going to tap your artifacts either. So you're just basically stuck. You're just going to have to just keep choosing lands over and over again, most likely, until you can get rid of this. So yeah, it is a very, very Staxia card. One that can really slow things down a lot, and one that, again, is not necessarily symmetrical, so it can really rub some players the wrong way. So that is why Storage Matrix is good enough for 16th place as the most hated artifact. Next up, hey little guy, Esper Sentinel, 15th place, a 1/1 human soldier for a single white mana. Again, just a 1/1 for 1. What's the worst that it could be? Well, here we go. Whenever opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless they pay 1. Rex is Esper Sentinel's power. I think I said 1, it's X, but we wanted to start. Anyways, having a essentially taxing effect that your opponents better pay, and if they don't, then all of a sudden you're going to be getting an absurd amount of cards again absurdly early on in the game. They're going to be in trouble, and yeah, that can add up a lot throughout the game. And of course, that taxing effect can also add up to even more because, again, it's based on power. So yeah, if you get this done early, you get a huge advantage, and that is why it's good enough for 15th place. Next up, let's move on to 14th place with 1.61 in the Assault score. We've got Torpor Orb. So there are some things that Magic players, Commander players especially, just don't like to hear. I mean, me personally, I don't like activated sorcery speed. I don't like this triggers only once each turn. And many players out there don't like to hear no or can't. And this one is like, hey, you know what happens? I guess there's a don't there, not a no or a can't. But artifact for 2 mana, creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. I guess that's a no in some way, right? It's like, hey, you've got your Blink deck, you got your ETV deck. Good for you. That's not going to happen. This little 2 mana artifact's just going to sit and play. Oh, and oh, that really hurts because like you have that Elvish Rejuvenator, which has an ETB destroy an artifact, but oh, darn, you can't destroy it because you can't get that ETB. So sorry. Nope, that's not happening. And of course, if I'm playing this, I've got some ways where I can take advantage of it, where there might be some downsides to some ETBs that I have actually. And it's like, nope, I don't get those downsides. They don't happen. So yeah, I'm just going to play my Time Sifter or whatever that one is, the big one, the Aeon Eater, whatever that one is, the 10/9 flying trample for 4 mana, lose 2 turns, that one. So yeah, basically being able to say, you know what? I don't get my downsides, you don't get your upsides, and no one does anything. Yay, Magic! Yeah, players don't necessarily like that. So yeah, good enough for 14th place at 1.61 on the Assault score. Moving on, though, we've got Time Sieve. This one's pretty obvious as to why players don't like it. 13th place, 1.62 on the Assault score. We're getting up there. An artifact for Dimir color. Essentially, tap, sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra after this one. There's something that's kind of missing on this. It's like, oh, no, you don't like sacrifice this. It doesn't like force you to have like this be one of the 5 artifacts. You can. You typically won't, though. You'll typically be like, oh, okay, cool. Especially these days when you're like, okay, I just made 30 treasures with all the things that you can do to make 30 treasures. Tap, sacrifice, 5 treasures. I get extra turn. Okay, all right, next turn. Okay, tap, sacrifice 5 more charges. Ha ha ha. Oh, I'll cast a spell, he gets more charges. Yay! It is infinite turns, quite easy these days. There are certain combos you can utilize with it as well, ways to bring things back that you're sacrificing. Yeah, it can be quite obnoxious. And again, it's just a 2-mana spell. So your opponent might be like, oh, okay, they don't have a lot of mana left this turn. Looks like we're going to be okay. They just have a bunch of miscellaneous food tokens and we're fine. And then they're like, time sieve. Woo, game over. So yeah, there's a reason why this one makes the list at 13th place at 1.62 on the Salt score. Moving on to number 12, Time Sifter. There we go. That's why that was on the mind. Not the card I was referencing earlier. Anyways, a 1.65 on the Salt score. Time Sifter is an artifact for 5. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, each player removes the top card of their library from the game. The player removes the card with the highest converted mana cost next turn for this one. 2 or more player cards are tied. They repeat the process until the tie is broken. Okay, basically, let's just have random players get random turns, essentially, is how this is going to work now. It's no longer like, oh yeah, we just go like in order. No, it's like, no, it's random. Or, again, if you actually build around this, you're like, oh, I know what's on top of my library, and I have ways to adjust that to ensure that I have the highest mana value. So I can Fate Seal some people, I can mill people and know what's on top, essentially, and be like, yeah, okay, that's on top. I can get some of my graveyard, put it on top of my library. Plenty of ways to ensure that you know you have the highest on top of your library. So essentially, this is either infinite extra turns, not infinite because you're exiling the cards, but, you know, like as many as you need to win the game, or it is, hey, everyone gets random turns. We don't know who's going to be going when. So some player might not even get to go like ever again, essentially. So yeah, this is a pretty crazy off-the-wall card that can be quite obnoxious. So yeah, Time Sifter, 12th place at 1.65. Next up, we've got Trinisphere, an artifact for 3 mana that says, as long as it's untapped. And we already talked about that earlier. Players might not like that because that might not be symmetrical because you can take advantage of it. Each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to cast costs 3 mana to cast. So it's like, hey, you know that spell slinger deck you have and you like, you know, is not spending much mana on your spells? Well, unfortunately, you have to. You know, your little brainstorm you're going to cast, that costs 3 mana now. Your little Esper Sentinel even, now it costs 3 too, I guess something can slow down Esper Sentinel. But yeah, being able to get this in play and being like, okay, cool, I had already had like a lot of things in my deck that cost a decent amount anyways. And you might not, and if you don't, now you're paying 3 mana for that Elvish Mystic. Not very efficient, not very effective, slows things down quite a bit. And of course, again, not symmetrical. If you can utilize this, again, you might have things in your deck that cost less than 3, and you're like, oh, well, I can just tap this with my Urza or whatnot, essentially, and then all of a sudden, you know what? I can utilize my cards normally, whereas you cannot. So yeah, Trinisphere, definitely worthy of 11th place at 1.65. Moving on, one that I've actually made an entire joke deck around about losing your friends. Yeah, 10th place, Possessed Portal, 1.86, a brutal card. Artifact for 8 mana. So that is quite a bit, right? But of course, there are ways to cheat it out, ways to cheat on mana. You can also ramp quite quickly anyways. If a player would draw a card, the player skips that draw instead. Uh-oh. Yeah, players don't like when you mess with their card flow. Moving on, at the end of each turn, each player sacrifices a permanent unless they discard a card from their hand. Each turn, not just your own. This affects you on every single player's turn. Now, it's affecting you as well, right? It is symmetrical, all right? Every single player can't draw cards, and every single player has to sacrifice or discard cards, essentially. So everyone's going to be running down, right? Everyone, not just me, except for the fact that I built my deck around this, and I have a lot of, you know, pieces of creature fodder in play, or like a Bloodghast, essentially, so I can keep getting that back a lot. Yeah, things that I can, you know, reassemble skeleton again and again and again, get creature fodder out there, get whatever kind of fodder, sacrifice treasures, whatever you're going to do, make it so that you have, you know, more resources than other players, and eventually they have no resources because they have to sacrifice all their lands, sacrifice their hand, sacrifice their hand, discard their hand. But yeah, Possessed Portal is a game-changing, game-altering, to a grinding halt kind of a card that is just brutal and brutally effective. And again, for the right deck, if you can cheat it out, you can make players' lives miserable even earlier than you'd be able to. So yeah, 10th place, 1.86. The salt really jumped up there. Next up, move over Soul Ring, move over Mana Vault. Mana Crypt is in town. 9th place, 1.99, just short of that 2 for the salt score. An artifact for 0. At the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, 3 damage to you. Tap for 2. So again, Mana Vault, just costs 1, taps for 3. So again, you're getting the same amount of mana, but also that one doesn't untap unless you can pay, or, you know, you actually have another way to untap it. This is like, no. Hey, you still get to untap it. It's just, you might take 3 damage, or you might not. Depends on the coin flip. Again, you're at 40 in Commander anyways, so it doesn't really matter all that much. I mean, you don't really necessarily want to take a Lightning Bolt each turn, but still, it's not that big of a deal. And on average, you're taking like 1.5 damage each turn, essentially. And that's not too much in a game of Commander compared to the value that you get for, hey, putting this in play right away for free, tapping for 2, and again, all of a sudden getting your massive commander out way too early and just getting your game plan going before your opponents can even blink. So yeah, pretty crazy. This is another one too that might make players salty as well, because it's like, hey, not only did you get lucky to have that in your opening hand to get you this giant boost, which made it really obnoxious in that game, but also it's like a $175 card, and yeah, I'm not willing to spend that much money for that in my deck, but you've got a big advantage with that if you happen to draw into it. Regardless, a very good card, one that is definitely worthy of 9th place again, just short of 2 at 1.99. Next up, we had our tiny little creature Esper Sentinel earlier, right? Just a 1/1 for 1. On the other end of the spectrum, at 8th place with 2.03 in the Salt score, we've got Blightsteel Colossus in 11/11 for 12 mana. Oh, that just happens to have some things. Let's read them. Okay, Artifact Creature Golem. That's fine. That checks out. Trample. Okay, I mean, yeah, it's a big creature. Indestructible. Okay, yeah. Oh, Infect. Missed that one. Yeah, there's the reason why this one is on this list, because this is a one-shot KO on anyone. Essentially, again, because, hey, you need 10 poison counters to lose. This gives you 11, and it can trample over things. So, yeah, you can't just jump block with your little Esper Sentinel. You'll be taken out, unless it's got, like, you know, extra power, or toughness, I should say. Also, on top of that, though, if you engrave from anywhere, you shuffle it in its Storm's Library instead, essentially. So, yeah, this is also potentially a card that can prevent yourself from milling against a self-mill strategy, potentially, but more likely it's like, okay, I dealt with that. I used an Edict effect, and then they drew back into it, or they tutored it back out, and now I'm in trouble again. So yeah, Blightsteel Colossus, a one-shot KO. Yeah, there's many reasons why. This is a salt-inducing card, 2.03, good enough for 8th place. Next up, move over Soul Ring, move over Mana Vault, move over Mana Crypt. I had to do that because it's kind of, I guess it's not really a mana rock, but like it's a ritual effect rock. Essentially, Jeweled Lotus, artifact for 0, tap, sacrifice it at 3 mana in 1 color, spend this mana to cast your commander. Oh my goodness. Okay, so again, this is a card that is a high variance type card. It is absolute garbage in most situations if it's like later in the game, you drew it on turn 12 and it's like, oh, this doesn't really help me at all. But if you draw it, you know, to start the game, it's like, oh my goodness, yeah, Urza came out turn 1. Gross. So yeah, just a giant burst of mana, basically a Black Lotus, but specifically for your commander. So again, it can be bad later in the game, but again, on the turns that it is good, it is going to be really good and put players in a position where they just snowball so quickly that they take over a game in absolutely no time. And some players might not like playing against that. So yeah, this crazy ritual for your commander, Jeweled Lotus, a very expensive card as well that opponents can just get lucky and just have that in their opening hand, and there you go. There's potentially the game. 7th place, 2.11 on the Salt score. Next up, though, at 6th place, at 2.17, we've got Darksteel Monolith, an artifact for 8 mana. So again, like Possessed Portal, quite up there on the mana value. That being said, the amount of value you get from this is crazy and indestructible. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a colorless spell you cast from your hand. Keyword there, colorless, because yes, that also helps you with artifacts, but also, yeah, maybe like Eldrazi or Blightsteel Colossus, essentially. So yeah, being able to just play any colorless spell, and if you're using this in a colorless deck, it's just any card in your deck, essentially, most likely, right, for free once each turn. Sure, but still you're cheating on like a 11, 12 mana spell, getting it into play. And by the way, this thing is also indestructible, so it's really hard to deal with. So it can just kind of seem like, well, a game of attrition at that point where like, yeah, I mean, maybe I don't lose right away when you play that first Eldrazi for free, but it's not looking good because I don't have any way that I can deal with that right now, and they're just going to keep getting more free value out of it, and I have to keep dealing with these giant free threats that this player is getting. So yeah, good enough for 6th place, 2.17, Darksteel Monolith on the Salt score. Next up, a card that kind of defines what the Salt score is when it comes to artifacts. At least one of them, I should say. Smokestack, a really cool card. if you like stacks. An artifact for 4, during your upkeep, you may put a suit counter on it. During each player's upkeep, the player sacrifices a permanent for each suit counter on it. This is a card that, again, is technically symmetrical, right? It is going to affect you, and it is going to affect other players. That being said, you're the one choosing to play it and get the counters on it, and you are going to get more benefit from that because you're going to build around this, right? You're going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Again, I've got things I can just sacrifice. I've got fodder out there. I've got Recently Skeleton. I've got, treasure tokens, whatever it is. I can sacrifice things, maybe even for value, maybe even to benefit from those. And then my opponents aren't going to be so lucky. They're going to be like, oh, okay, I guess there goes my mountains. Oh, I didn't need those anyways. Okay, I got nothing else. I lose. So yeah, again, a Staxy type effect that removes resources, again, is technically symmetrical, but you're going to be getting more of a benefit from it because you're going to build around it. 5th place, 2.19 on the Salt score. Moving on, a card that Wizards definitely pushed really far last year. We've got the One Ring at 4th place, 2.21 already on the Salt score. Legendary artifact that is indestructible for 4 mana. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on it. Tap, put a burden counter on it, then draw a card for each burden counter on it. There's a lot going on here, and it probably didn't need all that text to be relevant. It really didn't need all this text to actually be this good. It really didn't even need that, like, hey, you gain protection until your next turn. It did not need that at all to still see an absurd amount of play. It is an indestructible card engine that really doesn't punish you when it should be punishing you, essentially. You're just like, oh yeah, okay, I'll probably take that life later, I'll just lose that life later, whatever. Oh wait, no, I bounced it back to my hand, so I didn't, or I removed those counters or whatnot. You've got ways you can get around it, and it doesn't even matter at the end of the day because you're like drawing at the very least 1 card for 1 life, which is a deal you'll make any of the week. And of course, if you've got ways to untap this, you can just draw even more cards for no consequence, essentially, or at least no current consequence. And again, it has that, hey, enter the battlefield protection until my next turn. So I'm easily going to just keep, returning this back to my hand with many ways, replaying it and doing that again. Hey, and also resetting the burden counters when you need to do that as well. So it is a card value engine that you can utilize in any deck out there. It's hard to deal with. And also, yeah, it just protects you too. So yeah, it's a crazy good card. Really pushed Wizards. 4th place, 2.21 on the Salt scale. But apparently not as salt-inducing as number 3, Mindslaver. Yeah, players don't like when you take their turns. 2.23 on the Salt score. Legendary artifact for 6. Pay 4, tap, sacrifice, you control target player during that player's next turn. Now, this would be nowhere near as high as it is on the Salt score if it was like, hey, tap, exile it. That would probably solve many of the problems with this card. Because this one's like, no, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Okay, I can control your turn. Thanks. By the way, I'm going to recur this to my graveyard with this other card. Get it back out. Take your turn again. Yeah, basically, once your turn is taken once, you're probably not getting it back. You're not surviving, essentially, to get another turn. So this is a recurable, easily abusable artifact that makes it so that you can just control other players during their turns and just take over the game in that way. And players don't like when you, steal their stuff, and they don't really like when you, steal their turn, especially. So yeah, Mindslaver, a crazy, cruel, good card. 3rd place, 2.23 on the Salt score. Moving on, though, 2nd place with 2.72 on the Salt score. Got Static Orb, an artifact for 3 mana. If it's untapped, again, that text right there, players can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untapped steps. Okay, so again, this is a technically symmetrical until it's not effect, because again, you've got ways that you can manipulate artifacts and tap them and untap them. So essentially, hey, you can probably untap whatever you want, essentially, on your turn, but your opponents will not be able to. You will ensure that they can only untap 2 things, and just 2 things is an absurdly low amount of things. Again, Storage Matrix was like, hey, pick 1 of 3 different kinds of things, just kinds of things, categories. This is like, no. Sure, you can untap like 1 creature and 1 land, but that's it. Or like 1 creature, 1 artifact, that's it. You can untap 2 things, most likely going to be 2 lands, and your opponent's gonna be like, okay, I untap my 2, pass the turn, hope to get back to my turn again so I can untap 2 more things, so I have 4 mana, so I can utilize that, and then not be able to untap things for a while again. It's a crazy, cruel Staxy effect that many players out there just don't like to play against. That's why it's so high on the Salt score. But again, 2nd place, not quite the 1st. Because, of course, the king of cruel, in artifacts that is, Winter Orb. One of the saltiest cards of all time. It's always up there on the salt score, 2.99. The only card that's like even remotely close to 3 on the salt score is this one. Artifact for just 2 mana. How bad can it be? Players can't untap more than 1 land during their untap phases. Yep, that did it. That did it. Not being able to untap a land. Yep, you can untap just one. Just one. You don't need your lands, right? Magic's not a game where you need resources to do things. Oh, wait, it is. And again, you probably don't waste to work around this, but I probably do. So being able to just say, oh, look at all the things I just untapped, or look at all these other things I'm taking advantage of, like, you know, my artifacts that are in play that I can utilize. And just be able to shut things down with this stack space, yeah, it is a very, 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 very salt-inducing card. Again, first place. Congratulations, Winter Orb, at 2.99 on the salt score. You should be so proud of yourself. But now as this episode is coming to a close, let me know what your thoughts are on these cards. What is your most hated artifact out there? Do you have one that's not on this list that you think should be on this list? There's other ones out there that are pretty salt-inducing, like, you know, I don't know, Steel Golem. Is Steel Golem the one that's like, hey, you can't cast creature spells, and then, you know, the Zedru player just donates that to you, and you're like, but I've got my all-creature deck, and I can't do anything now. Yeah, there's definitely some pretty brutal artifacts out there. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.